Let's try an example on how to find the confidence interval using our four-step process. A nationwide poll of 1,048 randomly selected 13 to 17-year-olds was conducted. Of these 1,048 teenagers, 692 had a television in their room. Construct a 95% confidence interval for the proportion of all people in this age group who had a TV in their room at the time of the poll. The first step in our four-step process is to determine the facts. Well, we're asked in the problem to construct a 95% confidence interval. That means that our C value is 95%. The second step is to set up our equation and pull important data from our problem that we have. So we have 1,048 randomly selected teenagers, so that's our N value. Our sample proportion P hat is created by taking the number within our sample who had a television in their room and dividing it by the total number in our sample. So that's how we get our sample proportion value of 6,603 10,000ths. And then we have a z-score value based on the 95% confidence interval, and the z-value that matches 95% is 1 in 9600ths. The next part of our setup is to identify the inference method as well as the values that are going to be substituted into our formula. So we have to determine the formula to use and then get ready to substitute our values. And remember that the z asterisk comes from the confidence level C that corresponds to the corresponding z-score. All right, so our formula that we have is our sample proportion P hat plus or minus the decimal value for Z star times the square root of P hat times 1 minus P hat, all divided by N. And now we can substitute these values that we have into the formula. So we'll have that it's going to be equal to 6,603 10,000ths plus or minus 1 in 9600ths times the square root of 6,603 10,000ths times 1 minus 6,603 10,000ths, all divided by 1,048. And if we substitute our formula, both forms, into the calculator, we get that our interval will be between about 6,316 10,000ths and 6,890 10,000ths. And our ending step within the four-step process is to state what we have found. And we are 95% confident that the true proportion of all people aged 13 to 17 who have a TV in their room is between 6,316 10,000ths and 6,890 10,000ths. Here's another example on finding the confidence interval. A national poll of 1,048 randomly selected 13 to 17-year-olds was conducted. Of the 1,048 teens surveyed, 189 named MTV as their favorite television network. Find a 90% confidence interval for the proportion of all people in this age group who choose MTV as their favorite network. The first step in our four-step process is to identify the facts, or determine what we have to actually find, which is the true proportion with the 90% confidence interval. So we've already found that we need to determine the 90% confidence interval. So now let's look for the variables that we need for our conditions. Well, our N value, or the total number of people in the survey, is 1,048. And of those 1,048 teens that were surveyed, 189 of them favored the outcome that we want. So we have N as 1,048, and then for our sample proportion, we're going to divide 189 by 1048. And that ends up becoming 1,803 10,000ths. And then because our confidence interval is 90%, our Z star value is going to be 1 and 645 thousandths. While still within the setup step of our 4-step process, we have to identify the inference method as well as the values to be substituted. So because we have a sample proportion, the inference method or formula used is going to be p hat plus or minus the Z star value times the square root of the quantity p hat times 1 minus p hat, all divided by n. And now we can perform the desired mathematical processes, which are to substitute our values into the formula and then simplify. So we have p hat is 1,803 10,000ths. That's going to go in our first spot. We have 1 and 645 thousandths is going to be our Z star. And then we're going to multiply that by the square root of p hat times 1 minus p hat. And then we're going to divide that by our n value, 1,048. And if we substitute these values into a calculator and evaluate it, we get that our confidence interval is between 1,608 10,000ths and 1,998 10,000ths. And the end step in our 4-step process is to state what we have found. We are 90% confident that the true proportion of all people age 13 to 17 whose favorite network is MTV is between 1,608 10,000ths and 1,998 10,000ths.